Hi, Guy.
Hey, Fuzzy.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Good.
And you? How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. You okay, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm good.
Awesome.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey guys.
Nice background. I feel like I should have put something in the back of my screen as well.
It's not too late.
Got a beautiful plant.
It hides all of the clothes and stuff, so
Yeah, all the mess. All right, so thanks for joining us, guys, and thanks for everybody watching. Happy World Oceans Day. So this webinar is a special panel discussion to celebrate World Oceans Day. It's a day that happens every year on the 8th of June to celebrate the oceans, to bring people together, to raise awareness of the threats to the ocean and how we can all work together to mitigate these threats and manage our resources more sustainably. So this is just one way that we're trying to bring people together and learn more about the oceans, about diving, and share some of our love for the oceans and diving. We have two very special panelists with us today. We have Sarah Richard. She's the founder of Girls That Scuba, which is a female dive community. And I think, is it about 700,000 members you have now, Sarah?
Yeah.
Wow. Gee, that's tons.
A bit more than that at the moment as well. It's been obviously a crazy
Growing.
but yeah, it's
okay,
growing.
very cool. So Girls That Scuba do all sorts of amazing trips and merchandise and all sorts of things. So if you haven't joined that community, you should. And Sarah's also a patron of the Manta Trust. So thank you for helping to spread the work that we do and spread awareness, Sarah. And Guy is the founder or co-founder and CEO of the Manta Trust. So he's one of the world's experts in manta rays, but also knows a lot about marine protected areas, diving. He's dived in some of the coolest places in the world and is always making the rest of the team jealous. So I think these are the two perfect people to be talking about the oceans, diving, conservation, and everything else today. Before we get started, I'll just tell you guys about the technical information who are watching. This webinar is going to last no more than an hour, so we're going to have a discussion for about 35 minutes and then we'll take some questions, but we'll also be taking some questions throughout the chat. So if you want to ask any questions or leave any comments, please put them in the Q&A box, which is on the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, and we will get through as many questions as we can. As audience members, you are automatically muted and your video is switched off, so we can't see or hear you. So this is the best way to talk to us and interact with us. We also would love to know more about your guys' experiences. So we have made some polls, which we will be sharing throughout. These will be asking you things about where you've dived before, what kind of places you've dived in, if you've contributed as a citizen scientist and things like this. So we'll be sharing the results. So if you see a little box pop up on your screen, you can vote if you want to, and we'll discuss some of the results and get you guys involved. Okay, cool. I think that's it on the technical stuff. So I think to start off, maybe you could both tell us a bit about what the ocean means to you, why you started your organizations, and your motivations. So maybe okay. Guy, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I mean, I grew up in the southwest of the UK in Cornwall and Devon and Dorset. And as a kid, I always went down to the ocean in the summer. My parents would take me down and we'd go rock crawling, go swimming. And, you know, I was fascinated by nature, all kinds of nature, and still am, you know, whether it was in the ocean or on land. I was lucky enough to grow up in the countryside and to have parents who were interested in and enthused me in sort of learning about the animals and the wildlife that surrounded me. And as I grew up and watched David Attenborough on TV and started to progress through my education, I became a little bit fixated and fascinated on fish, especially tropical fish, and I wanted to go off to the Amazon and like discover some new species of fish, and so that kind of led me down this career of going into the ornamental fish trade, and then going into marine biology and going to university, and then getting this job in the Maldives, which is where I first got to really encounter manta rays, and they were kind of like the pinnacle of fish research as far as I was concerned. They were the most fascinating, the most graceful and captivating. And I kind of knew, in fact, I think I said to the marine biologist who I was taking over from in the job that I'd started in the Maldives, is like, I'm going to study these guys. And she sort of, smiled and said, yeah, sure you are. But I did, and I made it sort of, my career and my passion to try and learn more about manta rays, to learn more about the habitats that they live in. And of course, the more you do that, that kind of sort of puts you into the mindset of conservation, because you start to realize the problems and the threats that these species are facing. And it kind of grew from there into this big now charity that helps to try and conserve these animals globally. So yeah, I love nature, but manta rays definitely were the species that I kind of hooked into. But if it wasn't mantas, it would have been something else, I'm sure, that was equally as exciting. Yeah. And Sarah, how about you?
Awesome. I think that it's funny actually listening to you say that. To begin with, it kind of started very similar to me. Like I, was brought up in England by the ocean and everything like that, similar to kind of your childhood. But I think what changed for me was I never went into kind of like education into marine science or anything like that, but I found I connected to like every single person that I met that was like an ocean person. I was like, this person's really cool, this person has a really great story. And I kind of saw this pattern that all of these people that I met while I was traveling or even just swimming or anything like that, like these people are all really cool. And that's what got me so connected to like the stories of the ocean. As much as the animals for me are such a huge part, like the people have always been such a big part for me. And that's obviously again why I kind of started this community of Girls That Scuba, because I just found that I had like an instant connection and something in common with everybody that I met that had something to do with the ocean. And that's very much led me through the path of any kind of conservation or kind of giving a voice to the ocean as well. So while I love the animals, it's that the people have really changed everything for me.
And the more I've done this job, I started off focusing on the mantas and then sort of focusing on broader conservation, but I was always thinking about the animals. I was like, this is the focus. But I've actually realized that you're not going to achieve anything in conservation unless you address the societal problems that are impacting upon the animals that you're trying to protect, or the habitat that you're trying to protect. Because ultimately, if you can't address those issues and you can't work with the communities, the kids, the fishermen, wherever you're working in conservation, you need to be able to sit down with and to get discussions and build relationships with those people, because that is the core of conservation, as I understand it now, is people. And it's certainly an area that, with Flossie's work on the Maldives education program, working with those communities, it's become a big part of the charity. And I think that divers are a huge part of our community as well. We see them as a huge part of what we do. They're on the front line of raising awareness. All of your followers will have become ocean conservation ambassadors, because they build these feelings and empathies for these animals that otherwise they would have probably had very little knowledge of or contact with. So yeah, I think that's a very important point to the work, and the message is it's about people as much as it is about the animals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we already went off path, because I think all Flossie asked was like, who are we?
It's so interesting.
I was going to ask you, Sarah, when did you first start diving?
I started 11 years ago, so I was 19, 12 years ago. Yeah, 19, and my first dive was in the Maldives, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Were you just there on holiday?
Yeah, I literally just went on holiday, and I was just like, this is obviously an amazing place, but as a 19-year-old, and just as who I am, I was like, adventure, where's adventure? And I remember I met well, I'm just walking along, and there was the dive centre, and the guy there was an English guy, and so I just got chatting to him, and he basically told me how he quit his whole life in a corporate job in the UK to go and dive in the Maldives because of this one experience that he had with 2 manta rays. And and that the first time I'd ever heard of manta rays as well, you know. And he was just like, he explained it like a poem or something. Like, it was amazing. He was like always dancing with these 2 manta rays, and at that moment I thought, I don't need to earn loads and loads of money in a bank in the UK and have a house and have all these material things. Like, I just need to connect with what makes me happy. And again, that goes back to saying, like, his story was like so inspirational to me, and I was like, I want to be a diver. Like, this was before I even got in the water. I was already like, I'm a diver for the rest of my life. I wish I remembered his name or anything. It'd be amazing.
Do you know, where did you stay? Which resort were you?
It was I actually can't remember now. Do you know, I was about to say Hanifari because we've been to so many places after that.
I know. And it's probably one of those places that they changed the name and the dive operations and everything. But yeah, I mean, that's the power of the oceans and the power of manta rays. Certainly, I mean, I'm biased, but I think that they're one of those species that truly captivate people in a way that can change the course of someone's life. I mean, they did for me. I mean, I'm sitting here today because I had a similar encounter to that dive guide who taught you to dive or got you into diving. And you know, we need species like that. I mean, they are fundamental to driving conservation, because, you know, this is sort of one of the strap lines for our charity is, if you can't generate empathy towards the species or the ecosystem that you're trying to protect, you're not going to achieve your goal, because people have to care. They have to really be invested in your message and believe it and want to sort of want to see it come to fruition. So yeah, I think that connection to nature, I think we all have it, but you need to expose people to it to be able to, you know, to achieve your conservation goals. Well, I can just see we have our first poll come up.
I saw it as well. It won't let me vote.
Oh yeah, you're not allowed to vote as panelists.
We're not, but
tell people your answers. But Sarah, how did you start Girls That Scuba? Like, what made you start that community? Was it just joining all those people together and all those stories together?
Yeah, I think initially it obviously started with all those connections and all those people, and, you know, but actually, you know, it started very much of an idea of kind of like, where are all the female dive instructors or divers or anything like that? And, you know, I think it was very much based on the position I was in at that time, but I was working in Truk Lagoon in Micronesia, which is, you know, it's some divers like top of the bucket list. It's where all of the wrecks are. You've got planes, you've got a submarine, it's wreck dive in heaven. And just with that, brought a lot of guys, and I was working on a liveaboard, and I was the only female member of staff. So I effectively was living on a boat with a bunch of guys, which is cool. No problem with that at all. You know, but I was kind of thinking, like, where are all the girls at? Like, why aren't they bringing their wives, or why aren't they bringing their daughters, or why aren't they bringing their friends that are girls? And, you know, of course, there did come quite a bit of sexism within that as well. And part of me was just thinking, maybe women don't dive that much, and that kind of like triggered something where I was like, well, I don't really want to accept that, so maybe I can try and do something about it. And with, you know, kind of thinking, I connect with all these amazing people, but why can't we connect them in one place? So I basically started a Facebook group, and I honestly wanted to just meet some girls that I could just go diving with and just connect with. And I just, to this day, it's still only been 3 years, so it's still so new, but to this day, as you say, like a ridiculous number like 700,000 or anything like that, even like 6 people for me was enough. It's just crazy that, you know, there are so many incredible people out there, whether it's men or women, and as a scuba dive community, connecting in a way like this goes back to where we are now on World Ocean Day, is that actually we are the people that can make the difference. And having, if anything, having a group with so many people and having an influence and a reach gives us the opportunity to really make a change.
And I don't know about you, but from the very first trips I went on and to the trips I do to this day, I mean, like yourself, you know, I do various expeditions every year, you know, dive trips with clients, and you meet some amazing people. And because you have that really kind of saturated time with someone for a short period of, you know, a week or 10 days or something, you develop these relationships and friendships and these bonds with people that, you know, people who I spent a week with 15 years ago, I'd still get emails from them saying, hey, how's it going? You know, what's happening in your life and stuff. And I love that about the diving community, that you really do genuinely feel that you're not just on some tour with someone, you build these, you know, these long-term communities of friends and relationships with. And that's something that then, you know, is very rewarding personally, as well as helping to, of course, you know, help to foster some movement, whether it's conservation or some other cause. So that's a really, you know, interesting and important aspect to the diving community.
I totally agree. I think that as a diver, you know, if you're going on a liveaboard, you automatically, it doesn't matter if you're going by yourself, because you automatically know you're going to meet someone that will be friends with you because they're a scuba diver. And it's funny now, as a 31-year-old adult, it's different making friends. And because of coronavirus, I've had to move, and I'm now having to move to a place that I don't know anybody. And I was kind of saying, like, okay, I need to like put out in Girls That Scuba, like, does anyone live here? Because I know how I'm going to find a friend is somebody that's a scuba diver, because we're going to have something in common straight away. Like, I don't know how to make friends as an adult, but I do if they're a diver. Doesn't matter anything about them. If they like diving, then like, I've got a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I suppose the coronavirus is a question that I don't know if we were meant to be talking on this webinar, but it does strike me as, you know, how is this going to change the industry? I mean, hopefully things will get back to some sense of normality, you know, within the next kind of, you know, 6 months or so. But yeah, I suppose it is going to change diving in some regards. And, you know, I don't know, have you had you're obviously much more directly connected to that than I am, but have you thought about that? What have some of the things that people have been discussing around that already?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be naive to say it won't change the industry, or it won't change things that go on alongside in the industry. I think the hardest thing is that we don't have like an end point, so we don't know, you know, if you know, coronavirus is going next week, then we could kind of like prepare ourselves and ready. But I think that's the problem, is that we don't really know what's going to happen. I think the main thing obviously is all the trips being cancelled, but what we don't know is how, you know, will scuba divers still want to scuba dive after this? Will they, you know, their situations change? And I think that's something that will take a bit of time to get to know. And I don't know, actually, you might be able to answer this question, Guy. A lot of people have been asking us in the community, and what's happening with illegal fishing at this time? Like, who is out there making sure it doesn't happen? Like, any organizations that were put in place before corona that now can't have staff, like, what's happening? I think that's something
that is a big concern. I mean, and the short answer is we don't really know. I mean, from our own personal standpoint, all of our research activities have halted everywhere globally, with the exception of 1 or 2 places like Fiji. Luke in Fiji, our project leader there, he's lucky he's in Fiji. The country locked down, and because they were able to kind of control the number of cases quite quickly, their activities, or his ability to go out, because he can go from shore in some locations, he can still get out and collect data, and obviously then therefore record if there's any illegal activities. But everywhere else, like the Maldives, diving shut down completely. You know, all of our staff are back, you know, in various other locations. In fact, we only have 1 left out of about 15 staff in the Maldives. There's 1 left in the country, and she's in Male. So I know she's actually in Bartle, but she can't go out and do anything. So we don't know, and this is a similar situation across the world, where official law enforcement is still in many places carrying on, but there is obviously a reduction of eyes observing, and we don't know as a result what that's doing to illegal fishing activities. Time will tell, because we'll be able to go out and monitor the sites thereafter. I don't think in the Maldives it's going to be too much of a concern. But it is broadly certainly a big problem because, you know, take somewhere, we've just seen the poll results come through, take somewhere like, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I always do, the Revier Ejido Archipelago. I've been told so many times by Mexicans how to pronounce it, and I still get it wrong. But yeah, you know, that's an island location or an archipelago location which, you know, depends on the liveaboards to be there to basically dissuade illegal activities, because there's very little in the way of patrolling by the official park authorities. And I just got an email actually from Karen Fuentes, who's the project leader for our Mexican Caribbean project partner, and she just says the Mexican government are slashing funding for kind of park authorities by 75%, and they've already been slashing the budget in the last few years. So you know if they're slashing budgets, you know, conservation is one of the first things to be impacted in global recessions, and so that's a real concern. Is not just a lack of being able to go out and observe at the moment, even when observation is legalized because of restrictions being rolled back, there won't be the funding to go out there and do it. So that's a double whammy, unfortunately.
So speaking on protected areas and sort of monitoring them, this poll has a lot of different protected areas in, and we can see there's quite an even split between everywhere. We've got quite a lot of people have been to Haniforo Bay, 24%, and then quite a lot to Great Barrier Reef and to the Red Sea. But what do you guys think the role of protected areas is with diving? You guys will have dived in a lot of these locations. Do you notice a difference in these locations to other locations? Do you think they're effective? What are your thoughts on these things?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I definitely see a difference. Like we're talking about Socorro, I can't pronounce it either. Reviela or something. That was where we were. This was our last trip, and before Corona happened and everything, we were out there for 10 days, and it's the most incredible place in the world. And I would say that pretty much most of that is because it's a protected area, and it's very well protected. And then it's, you know, as you say, Guy, like if they're cutting the funding and the liveaboards aren't going out there, because the only way to get to Socorro Islands is on a liveaboard, you know. So, and everybody that's on the liveaboard is all trained to know exactly where the fishing isn't allowed to take place and where these fishing boats aren't allowed to be. Without them, without the divers, without the staff, like how are we protecting it, how are we recording it? And it's, obviously I don't know what it looks like before it was protected, but if that place changes, it's such a sacred place. And I mean, basically, I can always see a difference in these protected areas.
I would say when it comes to MPAs, there's kind of levels of MPAs, right? That most governments start off by slapping in place some kind of paper legislation. They make an announcement because there's been pressure from an outside NGO or organization that says, you know, hey, this is a special place, you should be protecting it. That's either around a species or because it's an ecosystem rich or particularly special location. And so you have this then paper protection. But none of that really makes a difference if there isn't some kind of management plan and enforcement in place. And to a greater or lesser extent, that list of locations has, either just simple paper, park legislation in place, or it has some kind of management, or it has on top of the management plan, really active enforcement. And you need to have all three of those things. To have the enforcement, you need to have somewhere funding that, and often governments look to tourism to help fund the enforcement of these MPAs, because money talks. Money is the way that governments tend to value a resource, and therefore a location like Haniforo, which is extremely valuable economically, and indeed nearly all of those locations are economically valuable through tourism, if you can leverage that funding and you can put it in place that will actually ensure that there's an effective management plan and enforcement process in place, then they can be very, very effective tools to conservation. But unfortunately, somewhere along the line, often there's a breakdown that results in not quite achieving the full level of protection that we hope. But that's really where we come in, and we have to constantly put pressure on, and the same with everyone who has an interest in protecting those locations. So when tourism disappears, the revenue disappears, but also the eyes that are there to constantly keep the pressure on the governments to say, look, you should be doing more, disappear. And that's the concern, is that all throughout those locations, a good example would be Komodo, when management plans there were changed, when you had different processes to help enforce protections within the park in Komodo, we saw massive increases in illegal activities of dynamite blasting and other forms of illegal fishing back inside the park, which for decades was considered one of the most pristine locations to dive in the world. So it's unfortunately it's a constant effort to keep the level of protection, and you have to drop it once, and you can really very quickly degrade the location. And that's my fear for these this 6 months or a year, however long it is, that we go back into these places and some of these animals have been heavily fished, or the habitat's degraded in other ways.
Yeah. Okay, so we've had a question about this poll from Philippa. Philippa said, from that list of dive locations, which one would Guy and Sarah recommend for their top manta encounter?
Well, I'll let Sarah go first, but I think everyone's going to know my answer.
Yeah, I'll say a different answer from what I know you'll say then. So yeah, Socorro, definitely. I mean, it's a crazy encounter with like the oceanics there, because they seem to love the bubbles from the divers. So they'll actually just hover above your head and they'll just stay. And like, obviously we stay because we want to also interact with them. But even once you have to come up or whatever, you move along, they just follow. They just want to hang out. And the interaction there is completely different from places, like Komodo, where, you'll see them and they'll be around, but they don't necessarily want to come up to you. And it's almost weird for you as a diver, because we're taught, and as ocean activists and everything, is never come near to the animals, never approach them, and you're so instilled in that behavior as a diver. And then suddenly you're in Socorro and a manta ray is coming towards you and you think, oh, okay, should I get, you're getting out of the way of it's an incredible interaction in Socorro. And they're absolutely huge. Like you just can't fathom the size of these mantas in Socorro. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. I think the question is, I usually answer it like this, is if you want to have your mind blown by the sheer quantity of manta rays, then Hanifaro is hands down winner. I mean, it's not a dive location. It's free diving / snorkeling only these days. But that doesn't detract from the experience. It is, still to this day, I do not know where to look if you're, surrounded by 100 plus, sometimes 200 manta rays, and they're literally sort of brushing past you, and in this feeding frenzy. It's an amazing, unbelievable. I would say it is up there with the sort of the top 10 of natural history experiences that you can have, whether that's ocean or terrestrial. It's just a very, very special location. But if you want to have an intimate, truly personal connection with an individual manta ray, I would agree with Sarah that going to hang out at the boiler around San Benedicto Island is just equally a special encounter. And the list there of other locations, to a greater or lesser extent, you can have an interaction with a manta. Cocos is probably the one where the least the number of mantas are seen, very infrequently. But yeah, they would be my top two. Oceanics, go to the Revilla Ejidos Islands, and if you want to see reef mantas, go to Hanifaro.
Okay, there's so many cool locations on there. what would you guys say if you could dive one of those locations for the rest of your life, but you couldn't dive anywhere else? What would you pick?
How far?
Really?
I'm going to say Red Sea, actually. I think Red Sea offers it all. I really do. I think that it's lovely warm water, it's clear water, and you can see so many different animals, and you can do so much different kind of diving. As much as I would love to, live around some Benedictine Islands and, Socorro Islands, it's, it's right in the middle of nowhere, and there's different types of diving, but Red Sea has just always been one of my favorites.
I've never done enough. I want to go to the south of the Red Sea. I keep every year we sort of talk about planning a trip go down to Sudan to see the hammerheads and the mantas and the other amazing marine life. But I've only dived up in the north of the Red Sea. I definitely would love to.
Yeah, the south is where it's at.
All right. So we've talked a bit about protected areas, about the best places we can dive. What about the sort of interlinks between diving and tourism and conservation? So there's some ways that I can think of that divers can get involved in conservation, citizen science, following codes of conduct, but which ways do you think they can get involved? Maybe Sarah, you can go first.
Well, I like to think that, myself and like Girls That Scuba, we kind of represent a community of divers who maybe aren't necessarily a marine biologist or have, a science background, but just as a diver, it's enough to, all divers care about the ocean. And I think that it's important for everyone to realise that to protect the ocean and actually to make a difference, you don't have to, maybe go down the science route. And of course, like joining an assistant science trip would be amazing, but it's not actually feasible for everyone. It costs money and everything like that. And so I always say it's important to start protecting the ocean is before you even get in the ocean. Like as a consumer, which we all are, we have choices in what we buy, we have choices in what we eat, what we consume, and actually that is directly linked to the ocean. So things like, obviously we all know about reef safe sun cream now, so we all know about making that right choice to make sure that your sun cream you put on is not poisoning the reefs. But then you have to also think back about what other products you're using and if they're poisonous, and then go back to what you eat. I mean, as a diver, you can obviously, a very easy way to protect the ocean is to cut down on the amount of fish you eat or not eat fish at all. But anything, as a person, you can be a conservationist without having to spend money, without having to do courses. It's about every single decision you make in your life as a consumer. And it's very important for everybody to know that, I think. So while it is great to, if I'm like, everyone come on a citizen science trip, like one of Manta Trust, like come on a citizen science trip, do some research, it might not always be feasible for everyone. So I think that's another great thing, is what the community can represent.
And talking about it with your family and friends, the people who are passionate about the oceans, we are, often in a bubble. We have these social network communities, which are a fantastic way to share and express our thoughts and wishes for greater conservation. But one of the things that we're trying to do is how do you reach out beyond your little bubble of diver community, conservation community, and that is definitely a way that that I've been trying to think hard about how we do, and how to involve people who hopefully in the future will be able to have those experiences that we've had. And I think a lot of that is starting at the bottom with education programs, especially in countries where we're often visiting to have these experiences, but trying to get those younger generations aware of and sort of connected to the oceans, and then hopefully that will spill over into how they think about their daily lives and activities. Because like you said, so we all make decisions, we all make choices about what we consume, and it's a there's so many things to worry about, there's so many things that we should or shouldn't be doing, but every little thing makes a difference, and that can be a positive thing if you're able to just make some choices that can improve, you know, the way you live your life for the natural world. So yeah. And then, of course, going back to the specifics that Flossie said, you know, helping to contribute knowledge and imagery to the Manta Trust, or you know, coming on one of our trips, and that kind of stuff is the, you know, the obvious. And I suspect that most people listening to this webinar will already be at that level of engagement. Yeah, and I can just see the polls come up. It says 55% of people have contributed photos or other information to scientists. So I mean, that's already, you know, pretty significant number. I mean, that's great to see that many people contributing.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And then the other thing that's part of being a diver is respecting a code of conduct, whether that's something that's set out by the tour operator, by the people that you're on the trip with, or whether that's something you just internally have this code of conduct to respect the marine life. But sort of what place do you guys think that plays in tourism?
A big part. I mean, it comes from it goes back to the kind of the top-down approach of management for not just MPAs, but this applies to specific regulations that often are within MPAs or at a sort of a species specific level. And governments need to ultimately be putting in place regulations that control how divers behave at a location. Because at the moment, nearly all of those guidelines that we create are exactly that. They're guidelines. They are codes of conduct. They're voluntarily implemented by operators or by individuals who want to do things the right way. But that can only go so far. And so we need to see government uptake and implementation and inclusion of these science-based guidelines and regulations within management plans. And there needs to be real teeth, penalties, and sort of ways to force those who are non-compliant to behave more sustainably, because these sites cannot sustain even the most well-intentioned divers and dive operators if your quantities, the sheer volume of diving increases to the point where, you know, it negatively impacts these animals, so or these habitats. So yeah, I think it's very important that we have these guidelines in place.
Yeah. And these guidelines, obviously a lot of them state that you shouldn't chase an animal, you shouldn't touch an animal, you should give it space, and that's for the health of the animal, to not distress it, to not interrupt what it's doing in its own habitat, but also to make you have a better experience with that animal. So I'm sure you guys have had some amazing experiences whilst diving and following your own codes of conduct. Maybe you can tell us a bit about some of your favorite dive experiences.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Yeah, I've definitely had some amazing experiences when diving. And I think that from the position I'm in, running the big social media platform, you know, a lot of people see these experiences and they say, oh my gosh, you're so lucky. Like, you know, oh, I wish that would happen to me. And I mean, the truth is I have been diving for 12 years and I've done a lot of dives, and I can tell you that I've done dives where I've seen absolutely nothing, you know, and I've been out on boats for a week and we've not seen what we're supposed to or what we're looking for, because in the end of the day, it's nature and it's the ocean, and the ocean is going to do exactly what it wants to do. So while of course we have some amazing opportunities to interact with animals and have amazing times on the ocean, it's not guaranteed, and some of us can maybe be a little bit impatient and, you know, want to have that experience or to get that photo. And I think it is very important to know that even people like us that are sharing our experiences, it does take a while to get there. And for me, something, you know, I absolutely love dolphins, and from a kid, you know, all I wanted to read was like books about dolphins, all I wanted to watch was stuff about dolphins, and then going into adult, all I wanted to do was swim with dolphins, you know, for years and years and years. And it wasn't until this trip, which I keep talking about, to Socorro, that I actually scuba dived with dolphins, which was a few months ago. So, you know, that effectively has taken me 31 years to do that ultimate dream. So it does take a long time, but the experiences do happen, and when they do, it is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, for me, a lot of my amazing experiences have been with the larger animals. I think I can connect with them a little bit more. I mean, when you do see a manta kind of rolling its eye and looking at you, you are pretty sure it's looking into your soul. You know, and you think that at that time, you know, that connection that you've got with that manta is so unique, and having them so close to you, and really, you know, but you feel so humbled, and it makes everything you've ever done in life worth it when you get experiences, especially with the big pelagics. I love the whale sharks and manta rays, the dolphins and the sharks. So I've had so many incredible experiences.
I mean, I always, you know, and I 100% agree with you, Sarah, that, you know, you're not going to see everything all the time. There's always going to be something that you want to see that you won't get the chance to see. But, you know, hopefully, if you're lucky, you will see some amazing things. And I always say to people when, you know, I'm leading a trip, we're talking about the kind of questions about how should you behave underwater when you see a manta ray or you see something else, is look, these are wild animals. They're wild animals, and even the biggest, scariest wild animals, whether it's, you know, great white shark or, you know, some other big underwater predator, some large cetacean like an orca, they're naturally wary of something that they don't know, and therefore the best way to have the most memorable encounter with an animal is to not chase after it, to not try to be the one that gets that quick snap picture or that gets to the front to be the closest to say, I caught the best glimpse of it. That will never truly be as rewarding as if you try to understand the behavior of the animal that you're observing. And we do this, you know, with our pets and with other animals that we are more familiar with. If you put your hand out towards, you know, a dog and it growls at you, you kind of immediately realize, okay, the dog doesn't really want me to go any closer. With our animals in the ocean, we don't read those signs as clearly, but they're still there. And with manta rays, you can see how comfortable they are with you. And often the best way to get a manta to come close to you is actually to turn slightly away from it, relax, slow your breathing down, and to just allow it to come to you, because they are extremely curious animals. They're, as Sarah said, they look into your soul, they come up and they stare you in the eye. And there's no doubt in my mind that an animal like that is as curious about you as you are about it. So if you give them the space and the sense that it's okay to come to you, more often than not, they will. And if they don't, well, that's their choice. But I guarantee you that if you aggressively move towards it in a manner that that they're uncomfortable with, they're just going to disappear. And you may have, yes, a short, closer encounter with one picture that you can say, look, this is great, but actually the bigger experience is missed because of your inability to understand and try and read the animal's behavior and put yourself in their shoes or their fins. And that's what I always try to do to people, is say, look, slow down and think about the behavior of the animal and try and use that as a way to moderate your behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember going snorkeling with the humpback whales in Tonga, which I don't know if either of you have done.
Oh, no. I'd love to.
It was amazing, and I'd love to go back. But we did a couple days with a sort of private guest house that we were staying in, and it was amazing. We would find some whales, stay really far away from them, see how they behaved, get in the water, swim slowly towards them, and let them come to us the rest of the distance. And we'd get these curious humpback whales coming past. And then I went out once with a tour operator from the town, and it was awful. It was like you would have to cut the whale off basically and then jump just before the whale dived under the boat, and it was just horrible. And it was horrible for the whale, but it was also horrible for the people. So I was just like, how does this make any sense for either party to use this method? But people are so intent on chasing that animal and getting the best encounter. But patience is key in the ocean, I think.
And unfortunately, it comes down to social media. People want photos.
Yeah.
That realistically is why people want a photo.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah. So we've had a question from Jason. Thanks, Jason. Jason's asking about these sort of code of conduct. He says that he believes many of these irresponsible behaviors are learnt behaviors. And he's seen many dive masters and instructors who display irresponsible behaviors just to entertain their students. And he thinks regulation needs to come from the dive certification bodies, and putting pressure on the dive centers and instructors. So what do you think about that, Sarah, the role that the instructors have to play in these code of conducts and interactions?
It's so key, because for a lot of the customers, you know, let's say you're kind of on a vacation and you're going diving, and maybe you're only going diving once or twice a year. The instructor sometimes is the only person that you have is like a point of contact. You might not even see the dive center owner. You might not even be aware what certification agency you are even you know, going out for a fun dive with. So this is why actually instructors are kind of in the front, and it's so important. But I also understand that with somebody who maybe is like on a vacation and they're saying, I just really want to see, you know, let's just say in Tonga, for example, they spent all of that money and they're there and they want to see that whale, that humpback, then they put a certain amount of pressure on the instructor, and the instructor, you know, is thinking, well, I just need to show my customer and, you know, this whale. And that's kind of where it will slip for them, and that maybe they start seeing the customer's needs as more important than, you know, how we are actually treating and the animals and the ocean. So yeah, it's really important as an instructor to stand your ground. And actually in your circumstance, for instance, like with the guest house, like, you know, all they have to say is like, this is nature, this is the ocean. Like, we do not know if we are going to see a humpback, and I want your expectations. I want you to know that, you know, and I want you to know that maybe we won't see it. And if we do see one, I want to make sure that you're getting in the water with them correctly. And we all have a responsibility, absolutely. And even if you are a customer on the boat, I think it's so important to speak out. So yeah, while I do think regulations have to be put in there, but if people aren't actually adhering to the regulations, then that's different. I think as individuals, we've all got a responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's key. Is no one is excused from the responsibility to behave appropriately. But if you're not aware of how to behave appropriately, you know, then obviously, you know, that makes it difficult to do the right thing. I think we need all levels of accountability, and I think that it's beholden on each of us to learn how we should, or ask questions about how we should behave. It's beholden on the instructors, who are ultimately the teachers, and the people that you follow in the water, that you look up to and hopefully take guidance from, that they act appropriately, but that as not always they do the right thing. It's important that we have the government at the top who can, where necessary, put in place regulations that then allow for stricter measures to be forced upon, you know, the operators and the individuals. But there's no easy answer. You know, we don't want too much regulation. We don't want to make things too restrictive, because that then takes away from the experience. But at the same time, yeah, ultimately we need to safeguard the animals and their habitat, and that has to be the basis for all these regulations. And I think we've reached a point in diving where there is much greater need for government regulation and operator regulation. I think using PADI or one of the other big dive certification organizations be involved in that process as well, not just certifying the standard of teaching, but a standard of accordance with much stricter ways of interacting with animals. So yeah, I think it's a good question. Jason, I think was the question. Yeah. I think that, you know, it's an area that we're pushing for. You know, we're trying to get government buy-in and implementation of what are now guidelines that we've created.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to ask you both a couple of questions because we're running a bit short on time. We've had tons of questions which probably you'll be better to answer, Guy. We had one from Julia, I don't know how to say your name, sorry. We had one from Tao, we had one from Rama, loads of people asking what your advice would be for volunteering or getting into marine conservation in the wake of COVID, because obviously there's going to be less opportunities, you would expect.
Yeah, I mean, I hope there won't be less opportunities. I fear there may well be, but we're planning to get back up to speed. As soon as people can go diving again, as soon as people can get out in the ocean, our researchers, we will then continue to operate our intern, our studentship programs. In the period when that's not possible, we've been trying to incentivize people to help with our sort of crowdsourcing citizen science initiatives. We're trying to work through an awful lot of data that we've been collecting for many, many years. And as always happens, there's not enough time to do everything with that data that we would like. So I think right now I have about 4 master's students who are sort of processing historical data for their projects. And, in the future, we will continue to do that. I have various, I think about half a dozen PhD students that are also working on their own data that has been collected or is in the process of being collected. So, from an educational standpoint, you can go down the route of academia through your undergraduate, masters, PhDs, etc. And those are still open and possible as before. And, if you're interested in getting involved in some of our sort of remote citizen science projects, then you can send an email. I think we have information on our website about how to get involved in that. And and if you'd like to actually intern with us and volunteer with us in the field, you can apply through our normal processes, and you'll be added to the pool when we are able to continue that again. I think this summer is looking increasingly unlikely that we'll be able to take any of our interns out, but I do hope that won't last for too much longer.
Yeah, and there's websites like Zooniverse as well. A lot of people are asking what they can do from home. Citizen science platforms, not necessarily manta rays, but where you can get involved and help scientists out by counting penguins in Antarctica or all sorts of different things.
Zooniverse is a good one.
Really cool ways to help out. All right, Sarah, I've got one for you. This is another one from Philippa, and she said, as it's likely that we can only dive in the UK for the next few months, those of us in the UK, have you got any recommendations for places to dive in the UK?
Wow. So yeah, definitely local diving is where the kind of immediate future of scuba diving is going to be. In the UK here now, we are allowed to dive if you have all of your own equipment, including tanks. And there is kind of, it's a little bit harder with where would you go and fill up your cylinders, but some places are slowly opening. There are lakes and everything that's opening. I have to admit that I have spent the last 10 years traveling around different places, living in different countries, and I've never dived in the UK. This is the first time I've spent the majority of my time in the UK, and I'm not even supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be diving in Jordan at the moment, but now I am here for lockdown and because of COVID. Then that's something that we're going to be doing. And with Girls That Scuba, we're going to be doing a lot of meetups when we're allowed to kind of go diving together, and even if it's just to be talking about diving, because local diving is going to have to be our immediate way forward. And we're very passionate about keeping people meeting up and talking when it is allowed. But personally, I'm not the best person to ask about UK diving. I mean, Flossie, you're in the UK?
I haven't been many times. I've been diving in Lindisfarne in Northumberland with the seals, which is amazing. They're very naturalized and used to humans, and they will come up and they want you to tickle their bellies and everything. It's amazing. And I did the same in Scotland in the Hebrides. I went out with a group called Basking Sharks Scotland and looked for basking sharks and free dived with seals, and they were much more scared, and you had to really earn their trust. So you'd have to dive into the little seaweed and kelp forest and hide, and then they'd come up and they'd look at you, and then if you looked at them, they'd go away again. And there's a guy who works for Basking Sharks Scotland actually has this amazing video, and he's holding this wide angle camera in front of him. He's swimming along, and there's 8 seals all following him right at his fins, and then he looks around and they're all Oh, not yet. It's so cute. But yeah, I don't know, Guy, have you done much UK diving?
Yeah, not for a while. I did my right up to my dive master actually in the UK. So I've done 100, 200 or so dives in the UK, and not. I don't. I'm a fair weather diver. I don't really like the cold, so I did it while I was at university in Plymouth, and and sort of haven't done much since then. But in the southwest. I mean, Sarah, you're in the southwest. Southwest has some beautiful diving, especially in the sort of the late summer. It gets a bit warmer. Some beautiful kelp forests, and yeah, so for sure, people that are around. No mantas, unfortunately, but there's some brilliant things that you can see and dive with, and certainly where I started off, and yeah, like Flossie said, you can see some amazing things. Basking Sharks in Scotland, or even around the southwest of the UK right now. They should be starting to pop up around Cornwall and Devon. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think we'll have one more for Sarah. I'm just looking at the time. I'm sure you get this a lot, Sarah. This is from Jeffrey, and he's asking if males are allowed to join Girls That Scuba.
Yeah, we do get that a lot. Well, I mean, first of all, Girls That Scuba was started because there is a gender gap in scuba diving, in professional scuba diving. From kind of Paddy's latest, which aren't that late statistics, it's almost 70% male in professional diving. So that's dive master and above. I'm pretty confident it would have kind of the gap is a little bit more bridged now, but so that's effectively why I started Girls That Scuba as well, is to encourage more women into it. I mean, because if you can't see it, you can't be it. You need to be seeing these female role models. So that's kind of what we're doing, and we're working on consistently showing younger girls female role models. And so it's not a case of like, no, men aren't allowed. It's a case of like, we're trying to create a space where like we can encourage more and more women into it, because there still is a bit of an inequality when it comes to the gender of in scuba diving. There's many inequalities, but that's something we work on. So we have a private Facebook group which is just for girls, so it's just females. We've got 47,000 women in there, and that's something that we're kind of together in, and we unite in being females and being scuba divers. So no, we don't let men into that group, but for what we do, that is still a very small part of us as a community. And what we do lots and lots of other different things. We've got loads of other platforms, and of course we encourage men to be involved. Even though our trips aren't girls only, we encourage men, because and men have daughters and have friends and have wives and girlfriends that they can also encourage. So it's really, really important for men to encourage their the females around them into diving as well. So short answer is no. Long answer is yes, of course. Like, we all need each other to get more and more amazing people into this world.
Okay, amazing. And I highly recommend anyone to join that community if you're a female, obviously, or follow the pages. There's some such cool sense of family and helping each other out in there. Okay, I think we'll wrap up in a minute, but we've had a lot of people on who are asking about how they can further their careers in diving or conservation. Is there anything either of you want to say, any advice before we go?
I mean, for those that are interested in sort of pursuing a career in marine conservation, don't be afraid to reach out to people, and don't be afraid to do things in a way that isn't conventional. I left school with just like I had 3 C's, GCSEs, wasn't academically very good. I did vocational college courses. I then worked in the industry for a couple of years. And then I thought I wanted to go actually back and do marine biology. And, I ended up in a position which I would never have predicted specifically, but that I always had this desire to want to do some sort of career around wildlife and specifically fish. And I don't think that you have to necessarily do things the directly conventional way of going through university, etc. But reach out to people, get involved with local organizations, and get experiences that will allow you to sort of figure out where you want to go in life. And they are more important in shaping you and figuring out what you want to do than simply getting another qualification. I think those I value more in the people that approach me for a career. It's the things outside of the qualifications that I think that shape the person and really demonstrate their desire to have a career in marine conservation.
Yeah, and all I would add to that is that I know that obviously we're going through a hard time at the moment where it seems we don't know where the end of this will be and when we'll be back into the ocean, but it is still important. There's so much still going on at the moment. I mean, Manta Trust doing loads of webinars, and you know, there's so many things going on in the internet, and continuing your ocean education is still key, because as soon as everything goes back to normal, which it will, there will be jobs and opportunities available in Girls That Scuba and Manta Trust. And as you know, Guy said, that you know, keep applying, and once it is the right time that we can all go back to it, you know, these opportunities will present themselves again. So I think to not kind of give up in these hard times, and keep reaching out and keep educating yourself, and you know, keep your passion alive, because another thing you said is you know, it's not always about like what you've got written on your CV. A lot of it is about, as we've all mentioned, is you as a person, and you know, your passion and your dedication to the ocean. So it's just try and encourage everyone not to give up during this time, and you know, keep fighting the corner.
And to finish on something that I would say, I believe right now there's a lot of animals out there in these dive sites that are kind of wondering where all the bubbly humans have gone, and they're probably quite enjoying the break. So I think in many locations, you know, where we operate, there won't be concerns about illegal fisheries, and instead actually the absence of divers could actually see some positive changes. Giving these animals a break is important, and I think that actually there'll be a lot of marine animals that are probably breathing a sigh of relief of absence of divers right now. So yeah, we shall see when we get back. Maybe they'll be friendly, or maybe they won't.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of confused animals out there, especially the mantas in Hanifaru, but it's so nice to think of them getting a break.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys, thank you so much. That was great. It's great to hear from you both, and have a good old chat. And I hope you enjoyed yourselves and have a great day and everything.
Yeah, you too. And stay safe, everyone. Thanks for listening. For those that have tuned in, and Sarah, I hope we'll get to meet up diving again somewhere, some point in the near future. And Flossie, I'll see you soon, hopefully, as well.
Yeah, thank you guys for hosting, and everyone for joining in. And yeah, let's hope we can all be diving together soon.
I hope so. Sarah, I'll come to one of your meetups whenever we're allowed.
Okay, let's do it.
Be great. All right, guys, so thanks for watching, everybody who's tuned in. Thanks for all your great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but you can always email us at info@mantatrust.org if you have any queries. Check out our social media pages, Girls That Scuba and Manta Trust, for more information on mantas, on diving, on everything, and how you can apply for volunteering, jobs, studentships, things like that. We have some Manta Trust webinars coming up this week. We have one on Wednesday with Daniel, who is the head of Blue Resources Trust in Sri Lanka, talking about mantas and policy. That is at 11 a.m. BST, so you can register for that on our website now. And we've got lots more coming up as well. For now, that's it from me, and just thank you again to Guy and Sarah, and for everyone watching.
Thanks, Flossie. Thank you, Sarah.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Yeah, bye-bye.